now for something completely different. Jazz for strings with Dr. Steffen Zeichner. So Steffen, why do most string players have a hard time doing that? Like, what is it about jazz that throws them off, or they have a hard time acclimating to the genre?
Sure. Well, I think that a lot of string players come from the classical realm, where we're used to reading notes. We're not used to thinking about certain aspects of music that are very important inside of jazz, such as harmony and rhythm, to the extent that it is in groove-based music, as well as even how we actually create melodies as opposed to playing melodies that are already written down. One of the main big things that I see most string players having difficulty with is to actually sound jazzy, or actually sound like any dialect of music that they're trying to play. And a big part of this, to me, is that we are not used to, as classically trained musicians, I'm a classically trained musician myself, we are not used to listening to recordings and exactly taking their phrasing and their rhythms, and if they mess around with the melody a little bit, we're usually not used to really stealing exactly that. And there's kind of this feeling almost in classical music, in the classical realm, that if you do that, you're not going to be original. Right? This is something that I certainly never had a teacher tell me, okay, go listen to this version of Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto and learn it exactly the way that this guy played it, even if it was like a version that I liked a lot. First of all, we're talking about the melody for Fly Me to the Moon. Most people know Frank Sinatra's famous 1964 recording with Count Basie. I would bet that most string players out there who have done this on gigs or just on their own have looked up a lead sheet, and you end up going something like... Even if there's a little bit of interesting rhythm in there, it's certainly not going to sound like Frank. So if you listen to Frank Sinatra's version of it from 1964...
Fly me to the moon, let me play up there with those stars, let me see what life is like on...
A lot of things that he does that make it uniquely his, and they are phrasing and rhythmic things. Maybe he swings a little bit harder, maybe he comes in a little bit late. Sometimes he totally changes notes around. So we got something like... Like, that is totally different than probably what you're used to seeing written down, notated for Fly Me to the Moon. But all of a sudden, it sounds like an actual jazz musician, because it is. You're actually taking Frank Sinatra's language and phrasing and all of that and putting it on the violin. Now, that's easier said than done. You have to listen to recordings. Listening, number one. I mean, it's a totally different world. Again, in groove-based music, it's aurally based. You have to listen so much.
You also mentioned like listening to icons of the genre, especially singers for violin players, it's a good sort of like analog. It makes a lot of sense. But what are some other resources that, if I'm a violin player, who are other string instrumentalists that I can emulate?
Sure. So there are a number of jazz violinists, as well as just modern violinists, that are doing really creative, really awesome things with amplified instruments, with guitar pedals, all sorts. Some of my very favorites are Stuff Smith. He is the quintessential jazz violinist to me. Incredibly rhythmic, swinging player, which is not usually something that you think of when you think of violin. Of course, there's Grappelli. Another big person that I'm a huge fan of was Didier Lockwood. Didier Lockwood, another person who studied with Grappelli at one point, incredible player, incredible technique. All of these guys are at some of the highest levels technically, and when you match that alongside of musical and harmonic understanding and stuff, I think it creates a really special kind of player.
So where can people find you or a lot of this material and take advantage of the 30 plus years that you have, like playing the instrument and all the things you've figured out as it relates to getting that to getting that into the jazz world? Where can they go to find this content?
Sure. So my website is www.sizviolin.com, and you could also get there by going to the number 5stringswing.com, 5stringswing.com. That's my jazz band. I've got a bunch of videos showing me playing with my guys, and also on that same website you can access, I have a whole pedagogy section where I have a bunch of resources similar to the Fly Me to the Moon chart that we're providing you guys, as well as I've got a great list. I think it's so important to see other violinists that are doing amazing creative things outside of just the classical constraints, and I've got a great list of creative string players that I'm always adding to little YouTube playlist and stuff like that.
It's really a great resource. I really highly recommend checking it out, whether you're a string instrumentalist or not. Maybe you're a jazz musician who's looking to get string players into your ensemble. This is a great resource to reduce the friction that may be there when doing something like that. Well, Steffen, thanks for hanging out with us today, and thank you for hanging out with us. And check us out on our next video on Jazz for Strings with Steffen. Thanks again.